What's up guys, Kara Corey here, registered dietitian. Welcome back for another video. Today's video, you are here with me in my kitchen. We're gonna do a little cooking segment. I feel like it's been forever that I've just recorded a recipe for you guys, and I always get so much feedback from you that you love seeing different recipe ideas, what I eat in a day, things like that. So I recently purchased the book True Comfort, Kristin Cavallari. She's done another cookbook previously too, but sometimes it's just nice to get a cookbook and kind of switch things up a little bit, kind of re-motivate yourself when it comes to recipes. So if you're like myself, I kind of have my tried and true staple recipes, and sometimes you just get bored with it and uninspired in the kitchen. So even if you're not a great cook or chef, you don't have to be. This cookbook, from what I've seen so far, is just kind of really easy recipes for the most part. Some more challenging than others, but it just kind of gets those juices flowing again. So I wanted to test out one of the recipes today. I have not made it yet, so we're gonna be making it together. I'm sharing the recipe with you guys, and so if you want to make this as well, I think you may really like it. We're gonna find out. So today I'm gonna make for you guys the oat crust chicken pot pie, except I didn't have chicken on hand. I had some organic turkey, so I'm gonna do an organic turkey pot pie. So this is a bit more involved because you're talking about making the crust, making the filling, and then baking it all together. So this is not one of the quicker recipes that she has in here, but I wanted to, again, get out of my comfort zone and just do something different. Hopefully it goes over well. I've quite honestly never made a homemade crust before. If you guys want to see more recipes like this, be sure to like the video. It lets me know what videos you like. Make sure you do all the things, you subscribe, check out the post notification bell. I wish that was good enough, but now you can like set it on different levels to make sure you're like, you have to like check your phone settings and make sure you're actually getting notified and you accept push notifications from YouTube. It's a whole process, I get it, but you know, just double check, do all the things, that way you guys don't miss out on any of my videos. So this whole recipe book is all about comfort food, and Kristin Cavallari does more gluten-free, dairy-free style recipes. I do want to throw in the disclaimer that just because something's gluten-free, dairy-free, it does not equate to health. It doesn't mean that that's how you have to eat. I think for her and her family, it's a preference based on medical need or intolerances, things of that nature, but I just want to emphasize that point that I am going to be making the recipe pretty much true to how she's got it laid out here, which will be gluten-free, dairy-free, but you know, just want to throw that in there that you can make any substitution you need. Doesn't mean that it's unhealthy just because you use whole wheat flour, just because you use butter over coconut oil, etc. Any substitution can be made there. So being that this is a comfort food recipe, she states in here that this was just like something that brought her back to growing up. Honestly, when I think of comfort food, like growing up, like we didn't have elaborate meals. That's not throwing shade at Babs, my mom's, by any means. It's just like she was a working family raising 3 kids. Like for me, comfort was like spaghetti and meatballs, or my mom would do like, we'd do like hamburger helper, like things like that were quick and easy. That's like kind of comfort foodish to me. I want you guys to go ahead, comment below before we go on. Comment below what your favorite comfort food recipe was growing up that just kind of makes you go back to childhood and just think those like warm, cozy thoughts. Let me know what it is down below. So we're gonna start first with this recipe with the crust. So you are going to need a pie dish for this that I already went ahead and greased with a little coconut oil. Disclaimer here, this recipe is very high in coconut oil, so I imagine it to be a fairly higher fat recipe, but I haven't actually looked at the macros for it. We're just going with it here. So I've got my pie crust plate greased, and to make the crust, she has to use a food processor, which I do not own. I just own like a basic Ninja blender, if you will, and quite honestly it usually does the trick for me. So we're just going to go ahead and actually use my blender to blend everything up. The recipe does call for oat flour as a gluten-free alternative. I was not able to find oat flour at the store. I do find it's a little tricky to find, but if you want to stick with oat flour, If you have some old-fashioned oats, whole grain rolled oats, I would suggest. The quick oats may not be as good, but I threw it in my blender, and that's how I made my own homemade oat flour. Very, very easy. So you don't necessarily have to seek out oat flour. I wasn't able to find it. So we're gonna start with adding 3 cups of oat flour to the blender or food processor, whatever you have. And I'm not someone, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not someone that usually follows recipes to a T. Like, I'll find a recipe and then I just kind of wing it, or I throw what I like to say my own little Kara spin on it. It reminds me of like me and one of my dietitian friends, Melissa. We used to always buy Cooking Light magazine, and we would make it so much lighter than what Cooking Light was. Like, we'd always find ways to make it more like dietitian-y than what the recipe called for. So for me, this is almost a little out of character following a recipe. In order to like give it a fair shot, I want to follow it. Plus, I've never made this recipe. So the next ingredient calls for arrowroot flour, which is like a starch flour. It helps thicken things up. I've actually never used this before, so I didn't know how difficult it was to find. This is the Bob's Red Mill brand, which you can find at most grocery stores. I went to like my go-to grocery store that usually never lets me down for finding things, but then I had to go to a smaller grocery store to grab something else, and they actually did carry this there. It was found in the baking aisle, so you may be able to pick it up. This is going to be used as somewhat of like a leavening agent, if you will, so but it's just another gluten-free alternative for a flour, essentially. So we're gonna go ahead and add 6 teaspoons of the arrowroot flour into this. 1, 4, 5, and 6. Yes, if I didn't count out loud, I'd probably lose track and be like, how many did I add in there? Next up, we're gonna add some baking soda. We're gonna add 1/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda. And baking soda is one of those things that you wanna make sure it's fresh. Like baking soda, baking powder, flour, anytime you're baking something, you don't wanna use ingredients that are 3 years old, which I am guilty of, like going up in the cupboard and I have ingredients that have been there for 3 years. When it comes to baking, you guys, and having something rise, having something taste quality, especially with a pie crust, that's a little bit trickier. You want the ingredients to be fresh, so just make sure of that. Next, it calls for 1/2 teaspoon of pink Himalayan salt. I am not measuring this out. We're just gonna grind it up. Go for it. That seems about right. Next, we're gonna add 1/2 cup of virgin coconut oil, melted. And you do need a good amount of coconut oil, like I said, for this recipe, so I got one of the big mama jammas. So I've already melted that down. I've got 1/2 cup here. We're gonna pour that in there. Have you guys made pie crust before? Is this difficult? What am I getting myself into? I definitely could have picked a much easier recipe. Not that any of this is challenging, but we'll see. Next, we're gonna add 2 whole eggs in there and a tua. Something about cracking an egg, it's so satisfying. And then last ingredient, which I thought was rather interesting, I'm not really sure how much of a difference this makes, but the recipe calls for 2 teaspoons of cashew butter. So I didn't have any of that on hand either, so I did have to go pick this up. So we're gonna add 2 teaspoons of that. I'm very interested to see if this kind of, you know, flavors it differently. We've already got the fat in there, we've got the flour. So I'm wondering if this is more for taste than anything. I'm just gonna use my finger to push that out of there. Sticky little bugger. This is why I don't follow recipes. I already screwed it up. You're supposed to first blend the dry ingredients, then add the wet, blend again. I failed to do so, so we're just going to hurry on up and get this blended. So I'm gonna just throw this baby on the blender. I think it should be fine, but like ideally you probably would want to make sure all your dry ingredients are blended up first. That way there's no like clumping or weird stuff going on. All right, Kristen. How's this work, honey? Maybe I needed more coconut oil? That is a thick paste. Bet you my oat flour maybe wasn't blended enough. Smells good, but that's drier than a popcorn fart. So I think I'm gonna have to add a little bit more coconut oil to it. Honestly, my coconut oil was a little bit below the 1/2 cup mark, so I think that maybe could make all the difference. So we're gonna heat up a little bit more. All right, let's add in a little more coconut oil and hope that does the trick. So the mixture is still relatively thick, but it's supposed to be a dough, so I'm guessing it should be thick, I hope. So what I'm gonna do is actually pour it into my bowl, because my blender's not really This is probably where you should have a food processor, but I'm gonna put it in my bowl and kind of mix it up together a little bit more, just to really form it into a dough. I think I can do a better job in here. I'm gonna say this is where she was probably right. Food processor probably would have made your life a lot easier in terms of making a homemade pie crust. Maybe the Ninja is just not gonna do the job, but I'm not gonna give up. We're gonna use my little knuckles and we're gonna knuckle it. We're gonna knead it and just kind of make sure it's all blended together, because I did have some flour kind of in the bottom of the blender still that just didn't really mix in well. So you were supposed to only add 2.5 cups of oat flour and blend it, and then you add the last half a cup after you blend it. So that's my second screw up. Whoops. But I mean, it's kind of oaty. Man, it smells delicious though. Like the dough looks like really cool. I don't know why. It's just, it's different. So be interested to see the flavor on this. It almost has like a sweetness. It must be that cashew butter kind of giving it that nice sweetness. So what we're gonna do now that the dough is doughy, it's in dough form. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna split the dough in half at this point. We're gonna take our pie crust and we're gonna take half the dough. I mean, I'm just eyeballing it. We're gonna take half the dough that's going to be pressed into the pan as the bottom of the crust. So you definitely want to wash your hands before this recipe starts. She also mentions in here too, she usually makes her crust the day ahead of time to save time, which I can see that being helpful. I just kind of feel like if I'm gonna like spend the time to get the kitchen all a mess, I might as well just do the whole thing. I actually really enjoy being in the kitchen on Sundays. There's something about it that, I don't know, it's just fun for me. It feels good. I like picking a different recipe and just kind of trying it out. Also, this is gonna give me a nice amount of food for the work week. This recipe makes 6, you know, depending on what portion size you eat, but this will be great for dinners or if I wanna take it to work for lunch. Jason's not much of a casserole guy. Like anytime I talk about making a casserole, he's always like, like, I don't know. I don't know if it's because he didn't grow up on casseroles or he's never really been a fan of them, but we'll see if he'll try this out. There's no way that's going up the side. Actually, this dough came out pretty good if I do say so myself. So there's the bottom of the pie crust. I've got the other half of the dough reserved that we're gonna use to layer on top before we bake it. So for right now, I'm gonna take this and the pie crust and we're gonna go ahead and set this aside in the fridge. So here's the picture of what our recipe should and could look like at the very end of things. Looks delicious. I don't know about layering the crust on top like that. We'll see how well I do. So next up is the filling for the pie. So we are gonna go ahead and make this on the stovetop. All right, so next up, guys, we're gonna do the filling. So we're gonna take a large saute pan on the stovetop, and the first thing we're gonna do is melt in the coconut oil, which it calls for quite a bit. It calls for 1/3 a cup of coconut oil. So we're gonna go ahead and start with that. Next, we're gonna add in, it calls for diced carrots, onion, and celery. And just because I didn't feel like chopping it all up myself, you sometimes can get the mirepoix mix. I'm gonna throw in 1 container of this, which ends up being almost 3 cups of vegetables. Then we're gonna go ahead and let that saute for about 10 minutes. This is where like the thickening process gets really important. We're next going to sprinkle over 1/4 a cup of our oat flour on top of those vegetables and cook for an additional 5 minutes. And while that's cooking, I'm gonna continue to stir it. And then coconut cream. Coconut cream is something I've never used before, but again, I did find it very easily in the grocery store. It was right near like your coconut oil and other baking items. Now we're gonna gradually add in our chicken stock. Even though I'm doing a turkey pot pie, I grabbed some chicken stock. The flavor will taste totally fine. So I'm gonna add in what calls for 4 cups of chicken stock, and that is 1/3 a cup of coconut cream that we're gonna add in there. Once we've added both those ingredients in there, the coconut cream and the chicken stock, we're gonna go ahead and let this simmer for a total of 20 minutes while everything thickens up. After 20 minutes and everything's thickened, I'm gonna go ahead now and add in my diced up turkey, and I'm gonna add in some frozen peas. We're gonna add in some fresh seasoning. So I'm adding in here thyme, sage, parsley, salt, and pepper. And then that's just gonna cook up another few minutes to let all those flavors combine together. Next, we're gonna take our pie crust plate and our pie crust, and we're gonna go ahead and add the filling right on top of it that we just made. This is actually where I'm gonna get a helper because it's so dang heavy. Okay, so there's the filling. We're gonna go right on top of the pie crust. I'll assist. So we're just gonna kind of take our, ooh, that's a lot of filling. Holy schmoly. That baby's thick with a double C. And there's a lot. I noticed between the turkey that I added to it, we also added in the chicken stock as well, you guys, which is pretty high protein. I used almost the full container of this. There's 20 grams of protein in this full container of chicken stock. So nice high protein recipe here. So I'm just gonna mash that all down. Smooth it all down, maybe mash isn't the right word. Next, we're gonna take the rest of our dough that we had set aside to do the top of the pie crust. And this is where, like, in her recipe book, it looks like so pretty and perfect. It's like lattice top, lattice. I don't know how you say it, but where it's like crisscrossed. But I also got some like fall leaf cutouts because I was thinking, oh, it'd be cute to like cut out the crust and like place little fall leaves on top. I'm sure there's a more professional way to do it. So anyways, I've just got the dough between some parchment paper. Luckily, I had just enough left. So I've got to make this parchment paper last, but this is just to help it so the dough doesn't stick. And I'm just gonna roll it out. And then, I don't know, I'm gonna figure it out how we wanna add the crust on top. Honestly, you can do it however you want. I could just drop it on top. I could drop it like it's hot on top, but it's just gonna be a matter of like how professional and aesthetic it looks. So you could just place the whole thing on top, cover the entire pie, and then poke some holes in it so that it's got some like steam, you know, a few slits in it. I could do that too. That maybe would be the easier way than getting all technical with like strips and leaves and whatnot, but I kind of want to make it fall festive. Give this baby a good roll out. I did find that this dough got really hard in the fridge, so I did need to take it out and kind of let it sit for a few minutes before I rolled it. I don't know, maybe I should just place it on top, like as a unit. I feel like it's gonna break though. Can I just like, can I flop it on top? Oh. Okay, I'm not mad at that. Not mad at that. I probably could have put a little flour on the parchment paper. It did stick a little. I got a little herb in there. Okay. So now let's see if I can somehow make this pretty and kind of like push it out to the edges. I feel like working with the oat flour, I'm not sure if it's because I didn't grind it enough or I didn't use a food processor. Like it's a little more dry and flaky. So I don't think I'm gonna get that like super pretty crust as I could have. It's just very much so on the dry side. Yeah, we're not gonna be able to spread her out too much. Ooh, that feels fun. Feels like a waterbed. Yeah, no, it's not gonna like spread across like I'd hope it to. Okay, so that doesn't look super aesthetic, but so we're gonna cut 4 slits in the top of the crust. And I did do one little leaf that this little leaf edges fell off. I kind of want to put my little leaf on top. So this is what it looks like before going into the oven. It is heavy, super heavy. So what we're gonna do is place this on just a baking tray, a baking sheet. We're gonna put it in the oven, 375 degrees, and we're gonna let this cook for 1 hour and 45 minutes. So this baby's got a long cooking time. The process to cook it does take a while, but if you have the time, it's been kind of fun. I'm gonna go ahead and throw this in the oven for 1 hour and 45 minutes, and then I will show you guys the final result. All right, guys, it's now been a couple hours later. Yeah, it's a pie. It was baking in the oven. We got back from our crispy fall walk and came inside, and like the house, like the aromas in the house from this cooking in the oven was like, It just smelled so warm and cozy and tasty, and it just like gave you that good, like that good feeling, you know, like just that scent of it. It just was like perfect, like fall dinner cozy vibes. I cooked it for the hour and 45 minutes. This is what it looks like, not a ton different than how it went in, but the crust did crisp up nicely. Compared to her picture, I mean, obviously I didn't spend a lot of time making the crust look all pretty. In hindsight, I mean, I did a few things wrong with the crust. I think you probably would do better with either a food processor or get the oat flour that's already, you know, more finely ground down versus the blender. But other than that, I think this is going to be amazing. I'm not going to slice into it and eat it right now, so we will insert footage of me trying it and how I like it and how I enjoy it. But I'm going to divvy this up and eat it throughout the work week. So what I'll do as well is like pin a comment and let you guys know my thoughts on this for how it lasts, how it tastes like a couple days after being in the fridge, heating it up in the microwave, on the go, things like that. But I think this is overall a great recipe. You're getting a decent amount of fat from the coconut oil, but not a bad thing, guys. When things are high in fat, they're also gonna be filling. So it's just kind of a matter of perspective of where you're getting your fat sources from. I didn't figure out macros for this yet. If I do, I'll include them. But overall, you've got a super high protein dish right here between the turkey, the chicken stock, and then very high fiber from the oat flour, and then all those vegetables in there as well, the peas, the onions, carrots, all that good stuff. So I'm really excited to try this, and I would just say a tip for you too. This is a long process, I'm gonna be honest. I had fun doing it, but realistically, I know a lot of you may not have that kind of time. So what you could do is either A, do the crust and have like the dough all ready ahead of time one day, and then do the filling the next day, because the filling was like, for the most part, pretty easy to do on the stovetop. Or I feel like this recipe, like the filling itself, I could have just went in with a spoon and ate. So if you want to make more of a crustless situation, you could always do it without the crust, omit that altogether, or just simplify it a bit. But that's going to be it for me, guys. I hope you did enjoy this video, and if you do want to see more Cooking with Kara videos, then let me know down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. All right, guys, I wanted to do a taste test. I cut it open, and I've got a piece here. So it's very crusty, like almost like the filling is, it's a thick filling, but it looks like the entire pot pie was overtaken by crust. I like the flavor of the filling, it's really good. I like the crust too. Flavor of that's good. It's really different for a pie crust, but I think next time what I do differently is cut back on how much crust I use, because I like pot pie, to me I like more of the filling, like I'm more into that. So I think maybe next time I would just do maybe crust only on the bottom, or like on the top, vice versa, whatever. I think I'd probably cut the crust down in half at least, because it's so crusty, it's so thick. Let me show you kind of the inside of it. It got really crumbly, probably because of the oat flour. It could have been not having a food processor. Definitely tastes good, but it's a little dry compared to that like gooey, warm, stewy pot pie type filling. So definitely good, but I think I'm gonna play around with this for the future.